The Sefer Yovelim Jubilees presents the history of the division of the days of the Torah.
The Book of Jubilees, also known as Little Genesis, holds significance for certain churches in Ethiopia. Comprising 50 chapters, it contains ancient stories that connect people to their religious heritage. Written in the ancient Ge'ez language, this book is a valuable link to the past. Despite the risk of being forgotten due to the shortage of copies, its teachings on living and faith remain relevant to those interested in Christian history. Join us as we delve into this holy ancient text, exploring its traditions and teachings that have shaped faith for generations before it's completely forgotten. The Ancient Guide to Divine History. The Book of Jubilees, which some people call Little Genesis, or even the fancier name Second Genesis, spreads out over 50 chapters, filled with old stories and teachings that come from Jewish traditions. These stories are especially important to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the Beta Israel Jewish community. For these groups, this book isn't just any book. It's known as the Book of Divisions and is deeply woven into the ancient practices of the Ethiopian Church. It's written in Ge'ez, an old language that ties it to other significant language families. This book shares tales of common ancestors with the descendants of Shem and Ham, making connections between the past and the present. This old document isn't just a forgotten slice of history collecting dust. Think of it as a beacon of light for those deeply involved in studying the beginnings of Christianity. It has captured the interest of numerous notable scholars throughout history, such as Epiphanius, Justin Martyr, Origen, Theodorus of Tarsus, and many more. These scholars have left a significant mark on history, and their interaction with the Book of Jubilees highlights its broad influence in molding the early thoughts and conversations about Christianity. What's fascinating is that, despite the high regard in which this book was held by these historical figures, finding complete versions in Greek or Latin today is quite challenging. This scarcity has posed a problem for contemporary scholars who wish to thoroughly examine it, forcing them to rely on the version from Ethiopia written in Ge'ez. This version has proven to be authentic, especially after the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. These scrolls included fragments that closely matched the content in the Ge'ez texts, offering compelling evidence that the Ge'ez version is a faithful representation of the original texts believed to have disappeared over the ages. The Book of Jubilees stands out for its method of organizing biblical history into segments known as Jubilees, which are cycles lasting 49 years, composed of 7 sets of 7 years each. This structuring of time aids in narrating the history from the world's creation to the time when the laws were handed down on Mount Sinai in an organized fashion. It further underscores the significance of observing Jewish religious festivals precisely, highlighting the unique bond between the community of Israelites and God. Dividing history into Jubilees serves 2 primary purposes. It simplifies the historical timeline and underlines the importance of adhering to religious practices and ceremonies. This chronological arrangement links significant biblical figures to later established religious customs. The author of the Book of Jubilees aimed to demonstrate that these early religious figures were practitioners of these traditions, thereby lending an aura of antiquity and gravity to these practices. This technique is a common feature in Jewish apocalyptic literature, where ancient tales are reinterpreted to reinforce the religious beliefs and rituals prevalent at the time of writing. The Book of Jubilees, penned in the 2nd century BCE, was particularly esteemed by the Essene community residing in Qumran, as evidenced by fragments of this text found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It also enjoyed popularity within the early Christian circles, referenced by many pioneering church leaders and theologians. Although it was once a widely read work, offering insightful perspectives into Jewish religious concepts and eschatological views of its time, most Jewish and Christian denominations today do not acknowledge Jubilees as part of their sacred scriptures. Nevertheless, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and the Beta Israel community in Ethiopia continue to regard it as a pivotal religious document. Despite its previously crucial role in certain spiritual traditions, the Book of Jubilees is currently in danger of fading into obscurity, with a mere 4 complete manuscripts remaining in the Ge'ez language, dating back to the 15th and 16th centuries. This scarce survival, reinforced by mentions from a variety of early religious scholars, narrates the resilience of a work that has maintained its relevance despite challenging periods. It is the tale of a document that has preserved its value through its profound historical and theological insights, even as it encounters the risk of being forgotten and as the focus of religious study shifts. The enduring respect for Jubilees, in spite of the modern era's changing religious interests and the dwindling number of copies, speaks to its lasting importance. It acts as a vital link, connecting current believers to their spiritual ancestry, offering a perspective through which the complexity of ancient faith practices and their interpretations can be explored. The laws and stories within Jubilees remind us of the perpetual effort to live in alignment with what is perceived as divine guidance, reflecting the evolving nature of religious understanding and practice through time. Next, we explore the history and debates of the Book of Jubilees. The hidden message of the Book of Jubilees. The story of the Book of Jubilees, with its scattered remnants and existence, feels like it's straight out of a drama-filled academic series, filled with lost writings, linguistic mysteries, and scholarly disagreements that could keep conference halls buzzing for years. In this adventure, we find a small piece of a Latin translation, just a fragment of the entire work, acting as a clue pointing back to the hard-to-find Greek version of this ancient manuscript. It's a mix of humor and sadness. Seeing these small pieces suggest a once more complete story that's now disappeared over the ages. In this tale, a collection of 27 texts from Ethiopia emerges as the unexpected hero, becoming the main resource for English translations. This collection is a strange foundation for researchers today because it includes passages similar to those in Genesis, but doesn't exactly match our translations. It's like a complicated game of telephone, where the original Hebrew texts of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus seem to be based on some lost version that can't be directly compared to the well-known texts of today. Then, a historian shares the story of the different versions of these religious texts that have caused so much debate. Long before the time of Jesus, there wasn't just one version of these manuscripts. We hear about the Babylonian, Samaritan, and what's called the Proto-Masoretic versions, each bringing its own twist to the story and sparking lots of debates. Once considered reliable, the Proto-Masoretic text becomes a topic of contention, questioning its accuracy and completeness. It's an academic banquet filled with intense discussions, underlined by a sense of skepticism about the grounds of these debates. The drama intensifies with the find of about 15 scrolls of the Book of Jubilees from 1947 to 1956, scattered through 5 caves near Qumran, all written in Aramaic script. It turns out Jubilees was quite popular, ranking up there with Psalms, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Exodus, and Genesis, especially among the Qumran dwellers. This popularity at Qumran highlights its importance, but also sparks curiosity about its role in religious history and how it's been interpreted over time. The Book of Jubilees, often referred to as the Lesser Genesis, is highly valued within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the Beta Israel community, where it is recognized as part of their official religious texts. Its significance reaches far beyond these groups, as it was also highly respected by early Christians and was a key text for the Qumran community, as shown by the many copies discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls. R.H. Charles was the pioneer in suggesting that the Book of Jubilees originated from Pharisee traditions, viewing it as stemming from Midrashic practices. However, the uncovering of the Dead Sea Scrolls prompted scholars to rethink its beginnings, steering away from attributing it solely to Pharisaic origins. The exact timing of when Jubilees was written has sparked debate among experts, but evidence points to its creation being before 100 BCE, likely between 160 and 150 BCE. This period coincides with the Maccabean Revolt and the animal apocalypse within 1 Enoch. Jubilees retells many stories from Genesis, but with extra details and laws, suggesting that many Jewish laws and festivals were established before Moses. It organizes history in a distinctive way, using 49-year periods called Jubilees, and stresses the importance of adhering to religious laws and rituals. This approach highlights its role in shedding light on ancient Jewish religious thoughts and practices. The complex journey of uncovering, analyzing, and debating the Book of Jubilees turns it from merely a religious manuscript into a central character in an ongoing academic drama. This drama involves intricate detective work, comparisons, and lively debates among scholars about manuscript traditions and the search for authenticity. The narrative surrounding Jubilees not only invites skepticism, but also commands respect for scholars' dedication to unraveling the mysteries that history has left us. In this intricate story of discovery and scholarly detective work, the Book of Jubilees stands out not just for its religious content, but as an active participant in the debates and discussions that shape our understanding of ancient texts. Its journey through history, marked by debates over its origin, dating, and significance, showcases the dynamic process of historical and religious scholarship. This process involves piecing together the fragments of the past to build a coherent picture of ancient beliefs and practices, reflecting the ongoing commitment of scholars to bridging the gaps in our knowledge of history and religion. Through this lens, Jubilees is not just a subject of study, but a catalyst for deeper exploration into the complexities of scriptural history and the enduring quest for understanding that drives human curiosity. Next, we look at how R.H. Charles explored Jubilees, questioning its history. From ancient texts to modern questions. Robert Harrison Charles, who lived from 1855 to 1931, saw himself as a kind of detective in the world of biblical studies. He bravely suggested that the Book of Jubilees was created by a Pharisee, drawing heavily on Jewish interpretative methods known as Midrash, and influenced by writings such as the Chronicles. However, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient texts that came to light, suggested that the Book of Jubilees might actually be older than the Pharisees themselves, challenging Charles's captivating theory. The Book of Jubilees, also known as Lesser Genesis or Leptogenesis, has captured the interest of both scholars and lay readers with its detailed timeline and interpretation of biblical stories. This text is recognized as official scripture by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and the Beta Israel community in Ethiopia. It organizes history into 49-year segments, called Jubilees, providing a distinctive lens through which to view biblical tales. Figuring out when Jubilees was written has been a challenging task for researchers. The oldest existing copies are in Ge'ez, a Semitic language from Ethiopia, dating from the 15th and 16th centuries. These copies are thought to be translations of much earlier works. Before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, between 1947 and 1956, these Ge'ez manuscripts were the main source for English versions of Jubilees. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls were about 15 Hebrew versions of Jubilees, showing it was widely used and hinting at an earlier origin than was once believed. James Vanderkam's study of these documents revealed that the translation into Ge'ez was surprisingly direct and faithful to the original texts. Initially, R.H. Charles thought a Pharisee likely wrote Jubilees because of its content and style. Yet this idea was mostly set aside after the Dead Sea Scrolls offered fresh perspectives on where it came from and who cherished it. Still, pinning down its exact creation date is a topic of debate. Handwriting analysis suggests the earliest versions date back to around 100 BCE. But parts of the text, like the Visions of Enoch, imply it might have been put together around 160–150 BCE, during the time of the Maccabean Revolt and the so-called animal apocalypse in 1 Enoch. More than a narrative or sacred script, Jubilees also underpinned numerous Jewish laws and customs, claiming that ancient patriarchs followed laws and celebrated festivals that were officially established much later. This claim gave these traditions a more ancient and thus more authoritative standing. Through this journey of discovery, comparison, and scholarly debate, the Book of Jubilees emerges not only as a fascinating religious text, but also as a key player in the ongoing exploration of biblical history and tradition. Its contribution to understanding the context and evolution of Jewish laws and festivals, as well as its influence on early Christian thought, underscores its lasting impact on religious scholarship. Even though the Book of Jubilees provides a rich and detailed account of historical events, laws, and emphasizes the importance of following religious practices strictly, most Jewish and Christian groups today do not include it in their official scriptures. The only exceptions are the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the Beta Israel community, who regard it as an official part of their religious texts. This book's intricate descriptions of historical timelines, legal mandates, and the special focus it places on the observance of Jubilee cycles present a captivating window into the religious and cultural settings of its era. The discovery of pieces of the text, along with other ancient writings that refer to Jubilees and date back to the 7th and 8th centuries BCE, hints that this document is not just older, but also more deeply rooted in ancient religious and cultural traditions than scholars like R.H. Charles previously imagined. It seems as though Jubilees, this mysterious book, is almost teasing from its place in history, observing as contemporary scholars rush to untangle its beginnings. This insight doesn't just complicate attempts to determine when Jubilees was written, it also implies that Jubilees had a deep and widespread impact on the religious thoughts and rituals of its time. This requires scholars to rethink its significance and influence, leading them to reluctantly admit that their well-organized timelines and theories might not hold up against the influx of new findings. Essentially, what was once believed to be a relatively simple story about the origins of Jubilees has now morphed into a complex maze. As researchers navigate through this maze, each discovery leads to more questions instead of answers, transforming the investigation into a challenging journey full of unexpected turns. Now let's explore how Jubilees changes classic tales. Mastema's Game: Angels versus Demons. Diving into the Book of Jubilees, we enter a world where familiar biblical tales are spun with unique twists, especially in how it presents angels and demons. Among its characters, Mastema stands out prominently. This figure embodies opposition, conflict, and hostility in a way that sets him apart from traditional biblical representations of Satan. The name Mastema itself evokes feelings of animosity and discord, sounding almost as if it's designed to convey evil. In the stories within Jubilees, Mastema doesn't just play the role of a simple antagonist. He's a key player in the cosmic battle between light and darkness, actively opposing God's followers and the righteous. For example, in the narrative about Abraham's test of faith with his son Isaac, Mastema is the one challenging Abraham, only to be ultimately thwarted by God. Likewise, during the Exodus, Mastema attempts to kill Moses, trying to prevent the Israelites' escape from bondage and continuously seeking ways to lead them away from the right path. Jubilees doesn't depict Mastema solely as an enemy. It also shows him as a being permitted by God to test humans and sometimes even to punish them. This paints a picture of a nuanced relationship between the concept of evil and divine judgment. Mastema ruling over nations that worship idols, in contrast to Israel being led directly by Yahweh, underlines a sharp divide between God's chosen people and those influenced by darker forces. The emergence of this portrayal of Mastema and the overall themes of the Book of Jubilees are likely rooted in a time of heightened Jewish nationalism and zeal, perhaps around the time John Hyrcanus ruled in the 2nd century BC. This period was characterized by a strong push to define Jewish identity and laws, against the backdrop of Hellenistic cultural influences and internal disagreements, a struggle that is echoed in the text. But Jubilees is more than just a historical curiosity or a demon-naming exercise. It represents a significant piece of Jewish theological thinking, with a strong emphasis on law and ritual purity. The book acts like a strict family elder who insists on the importance of following rules to stay in God's good graces. It's obsessed with legal details, reflecting a community's effort to maintain its distinct identity amid ongoing cultural and political challenges. In this book, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are presented not just as biblical heroes, but as ultimate examples of faithfulness and compliance with God's commands. Their stories are reinterpreted, perhaps to reinforce the message of maintaining faith and identity among the readers. These patriarchs are shown as not just figures in a story, but as architects of Jewish fate, with their lives serving as guides for living in accordance with God's covenant. The Book of Jubilees has a unique way of looking at history, organizing it into 49-year periods known as Jubilees, much like looking through a kaleidoscope, where patterns repeat in cycles. This approach gives history a kind of rhythm, as if all of creation is participating in a repeating dance, orchestrated by divine forces. This cyclical interpretation of history adds a layer of humor and intrigue, painting a picture where both divine and human actions seem to be part of a never-ending cycle of cause and effect. It's as if history itself is moving to a divine choreography, set against the backdrop of human achievements and mistakes. Adding to its distinctive character is the book's claim that Moses wrote it while he was on Mount Horeb, apparently to pass the time while waiting for the Ten Commandments. This idea adds an extra layer of intrigue to the Book of Jubilees, making it even more unique. It's almost as if the book is nudging us, challenging us to ponder over its true origins and the boldness of its claims, all while delivering a mix of stories that enlighten as much as they make us raise our eyebrows. Within the vast array of religious writings, the Book of Jubilees stands out brightly, crafting a story that teaches as much as it bewilders. Its focus on strict adherence to laws, its reinterpretation of stories about the patriarchs, and its cyclical view of time are not just oddities. They reflect the deep efforts of a community to establish its identity in a constantly changing world, clinging to tradition and law as anchors. However, there's a sense that in its rush to set rules and boundaries, Jubilees might miss the bigger picture, focusing too much on the precise following of laws rather than the broader principles they're supposed to embody. This makes the Book of Jubilees not just a historical or religious curiosity, but a mirror reflecting the complexities of trying to maintain cultural and spiritual identity over time. Its stories and laws offer insights into the values and concerns of its creators, revealing a community deeply invested in defining its relationship with the divine through rituals and historical memory. Next, we see how Jubilees makes its mark with big claims and stories that get people talking. Watan, the Untold Chronicles of Creation to Sinai. The Book of Jubilees is quite an interesting piece in the world of ancient religious texts, finding itself in a special, though somewhat controversial, spot among biblical apocrypha. According to the story it tells, Moses didn't actually write the book on his own initiative. Instead, he was tasked with writing down what the archangel Michael told him. This backstory tries to give the book a strong sense of legitimacy by linking it directly to divine communication. However, this very claim raises eyebrows more than it commands respect, leading to questions about who really wrote it and why it insists on such a grandiose origin. This has made some people look at the book a bit skeptically, wondering if its claims are too good to be true. Despite the debates around its claims of being divinely dictated, the Book of Jubilees has captivated and inspired many through the ages. Ancient rabbis delved into its pages, seeking insights into everything from the family trees of well-known biblical figures to the details of their lives. It gained importance among religious leaders during the Hasmonean dynasty and influenced other religious texts, including the Aramaic Levi document. This suggests that, regardless of the questions surrounding its origins, Jubilees held a significant place in early religious thought and discussions. However, the Book of Jubilees hasn't been universally accepted without criticism. There have been ongoing debates about different parts of its content, leading some to question its conclusions and interpretations. Yet, even those who might not fully agree with everything in Jubilees have ended up citing it in their own religious or theological work, albeit sometimes reluctantly. This reluctant recognition by its critics only makes the book more intriguing, securing its position in the landscape of biblical studies. In addition to its retellings of biblical stories, the Book of Jubilees takes a deep dive into the structure of the heavens, similar to what the Book of Enoch does. It describes various classes of angels, detailing their roles from sanctification and protection to overseeing natural events, with a level of detail that both builds on and adds to what we find in Enoch about the Watchers. This exploration of the angelic realm offers a rich view into the spiritual and mythological understanding of the era, adding depth to the broader religious and mythic traditions of the time. The Book of Jubilees, also known under the names Lesser Genesis or Leptogenesis, is a text from ancient Jewish literature that is considered sacred within the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and by the Beta Israel, the Ethiopian Jewish community. This text expands on stories from the Hebrew Bible, mainly focusing on Genesis and the first part of Exodus. It adds details and sometimes leaves things out when compared to the traditional Jewish Masoretic text. One of the unique aspects of Jubilees is how it organizes the history of the world from the creation to the moment when the law was given to Moses on Mount Sinai into periods known as Jubilees, which last 49 years each. Unlike other calendars that rely on the moon's cycles, Jubilees uses a solar calendar with 364 days to ensure that religious holidays happen at the right time each year. It also emphasizes that practices such as circumcision and observing the Sabbath were followed by religious figures long before Moses introduced these laws. Other branches of Christianity, including the Eastern Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant churches, view Jubilees as a pseudepigrapha, meaning it's attributed to someone who didn't actually write it. Despite not being officially included in many Jewish religious texts, this book was still significant for early Christians and the group that collected the Dead Sea Scrolls. The finding of about 15 scrolls of Jubilees written in Hebrew from 1947 to 1956 in 5 different caves at Qumran highlights its importance and suggests it might have been seen as an authoritative text by some Jewish communities back then. Scholars have debated when Jubilees was written, but clues suggest it was composed before 100 BCE, likely between 160–150 BCE. This timing is based on its connections to the Book of Enoch and the thematic similarities with the animal apocalypse found in Was Enoch, such as visions of Enoch and mentions of the Maccabean revolt. Since around 2008, researchers generally agree that the animal apocalypse was written before Jubilees. R.H. Charles, a notable biblical scholar, speculated that a Pharisee wrote Jubilees. This theory is supported by the text's strict focus on following religious laws and portraying key biblical patriarchs as followers of these laws before they were formally given to Moses. This portrayal aims to reflect the author's ideal religious practices. Jubilees shares theological ideas with other texts like 1 Enoch and parts of the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, suggesting these writings come from a similar religious and ideological background. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church holds Jubilees in high regard and is part of their holy scriptures. Yet, most other Jewish and Christian groups do not recognize it as canonical. The book provides a fascinating insight into the religious discussions and thoughts of its era, especially reflecting the beliefs of the Essene community, which is linked to the Dead Sea Scrolls. The discovery of these scrolls has given researchers valuable information about Jubilees' original language, which was likely Hebrew or Aramaic, and its translations into Greek, Latin, and Ge'ez, the religious language of the Ethiopian Church. Over time, the Hebrew version of Jubilees was translated into other languages, like Greek and possibly Syriac, but those versions got lost. However, the Greek translation was used to make translations into Latin and Ethiopic. The Ethiopic version is the only complete one we have today, and comparing it with the Hebrew parts we found shows it's a pretty accurate translation. Jubilees is really important for understanding religious thoughts and rules during the Second Temple period, which was a time when the Jewish religion was developing some of its modern forms. The book has its own take on several religious practices, like keeping the Sabbath, a day of rest and worship, and following a solar calendar, which was different from other calendars used at the time. It also talks a lot about the Jewish people being separate from others, advising against marrying or eating with non-Jews, and it pushes for a special calendar that's seen as being from heaven. Even though Jubilees isn't part of the main religious texts for Judaism or Christianity, it was still highly regarded in some places, especially in Ethiopian Christian traditions. Its translations into many languages show how widely it was read and valued. The details it adds to the stories from Genesis and Exodus give us a richer picture of how people back then interpreted these sacred texts. Jubilees helps us see how diverse religious ideas and practices were during the Second Temple period, and its influence on religious thought is pretty significant, even outside the official religious canons. Dive into the Book of Jubilees, a mysterious text with big questions. Who really wrote it? How old is it? It stirred up lots of debate and wonder. Join us to explore more. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more intriguing stories.